Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, this University of Westminster Smart Venues 2.0 Site Selection and Tech Trends webinar. I am joined by our speakers today, James Morgan, James Rees, Wee-Min Ong, Adam Parry, and Emma Nolan, and I'll go through who they are in a bit more detail. If you give us a little wave, we are now live on YouTube. Thank you for those who are joining us. Emma Nolan is a senior lecturer at the University of Chichester, and she'll be joining us first with a session on site selection and new perspectives. Then we'll have a panel discussion led by James Morgan, and we'll have James Rees, the Executive Director of Excel London. We have Wee-Min Ong, the Vice President of Conventions and Exhibitions at Marina Bay Sands Convention Centre. And we will have, contrary to what was announced, we'll have Adam Parry, the co-founder of Eventech Live. He'll be joining the panel. And Adam will close off the session with tech trends from Eventech Live. Welcome, everybody. I hope I did that slight bit of justice to the great session that we're going to have today. And I just wanted to remind everybody that this is a Learning Bridges event, and that's an initiative by the universities in the United Kingdom who are committed to sharing knowledge between their institutions with the events industry. And the institutions in this case are Westminster University, but also the University of Brighton, Glasgow Caledonian University, University of Greenwich, Manchester Metropolitan University, the University of Salford, University of Surrey, York St. John University, and I've just been told that Northampton University has also joined. So thank you to all these universities for opening up knowledge like this. So excellent. So I would like to pass on the virtual stage to Emma Nolan, the senior lecturer at University of Chichester, who's going to be opening up the first session for us on site selection, new perspectives. The virtual stage is yours, Emma.
Thanks, Miguel, and thanks very much, James, for the invitation to talk today. So I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about the research that I've been doing for my PhD. So research I've done over the last few years, which explores the relationship between venues, professional conference organisers, and DMOs, destination management organisations. So I'm particularly interested in the bidding process and hosting international association conferences, and looking at what influences professional conference organisers when they are assessing their venue options and their destination options. In other words, looking at the process of site selection and what are the different factors that influence this. So to give you a bit of background, there are about 24,000 major international association conferences taking place every year. A third of these are organised by a professional conference organiser. Delegate numbers can range from hundreds to several thousand. The event can last a couple of days, or in some cases up to a week. So these events are going to generate a huge economic impact in the host destination. And this is something that certainly hasn't gone unnoticed. So it's drawn a lot of interest from governments all around the world. And I would say that pre-COVID, the competition to host these type of events has been fierce, with lots and lots of what are known as second-tier destinations, so newer destinations, trying to get in on the act to compete with some of the more established conference destinations around the world. So some of the aggressive tactics that some destinations have been using include things like subvention and overt offers of subvention to attract the attention of professional conference organisers. So for those who don't know, subvention is usually a financial incentive, quite often a venue discount, something that is offered to a professional conference organiser, usually by the DMO, and it's a financial incentive that's generally underwritten by the government. Subvention is a sort of a general topic, isn't something that's openly discussed much. So in terms of industry circles, industry publications, it gets a mention now and again. In terms of academic publications, it's hardly mentioned at all. So it's perhaps something that is a part of a secret sales strategy or negotiations, and that's why it's not discussed. But there's also a bit of a question over how ethical it is. and whether or not subvention is something that should be used. So there's a bit of a question mark over it. But what we did see pre-COVID was a lot of second-tier destinations in particular very overtly offering generous subvention packages to attract PCOs. And something that I've been quite interested in is looking at whether or not it does have much of an influence when PCOs are making those site selection decisions and choosing venues and choosing destinations. So where we have seen a lot of venue development and developments in infrastructure in destinations that are now trying to bid for and successfully host MICE events has been in parts of Africa, so South Africa, for example, and lots of developments in Asia. So in China, in Thailand, in Dubai, in Malaysia, in South Korea, and of course Singapore leading the way, and I'm sure Wei Ming is going to talk about that later on today. What we also saw in the couple of years pre-COVID was a bit of retaliation from some of the more established destinations. So from Japan, New Zealand and Australia, for example. They had to take big steps to reinvest in their MICE industry and their offer. And at one point, Australia reported that they were losing about 25% of their bids to their Asian competitors. Since then, they have really reinvested in their facilities and their overall conference offer. So my research was to really explore the relationship between venue, destination management organisation and professional conference organiser to look at what influences site selection. So looking at subvention, but other things too. So my research involved interviewing a number of professional conference organisers based all around the world. I also spoke to the heads of many national and regional convention bureaus, and I spoke to lots of venue managers too, again, based in different parts of the world. So some of the results were pretty much what I was expecting and anticipating to hear. So I had a lot of confirmation from the different parties that professional conference organisers are always seeking information to find venues. They want help with accommodation booking services for their delegates. They want destination information. They want help promoting their events. They want help finding suppliers. And then something came up in a number of my interviews, which I wasn't expecting quite so much. And that was a discussion all around visas. And a number of the PCOs I spoke to talked about how this is really a big issue for a number of their international association conferences and how they really would love and are not getting a lot of help with the visa application process. So that's when they need visas perhaps for their delegates or their speakers, or sometimes even for themselves and their staff. And a lot of them indicated that this would actually be something that would significantly influence their choice of venue and destination. One of the venue managers that I spoke to said that he's very wary about bidding for international association conferences where a high number of delegates need a visa. He didn't feel that there was much support for PCOs to do this, and he didn't feel that it was worth too much of his effort and resources to bid for these events. As he said, they often went to other destinations that perhaps offered a little bit more support here. So something that did come up a lot in the interviews was the topic of subvention. Most people had quite a lot to say about it. So first off, the professional conference organisers on the whole confirmed that subvention is something they look for, something they ask for, and something that they are prepared to negotiate quite heavily on. A number of them said, we will negotiate quite hard with venues. One of the professional conference organisers said that if you are competing on a global stage, you have to realise that this is an element of success. One of the venue managers that I spoke to, who's based in a country and a destination where subvention isn't available, talked about how much of a barrier it's become for him. He estimates that he loses between 4 and 6 bids for major international association events every year through not being able to offer subvention. And of course, that would represent quite a significant economic impact for his destination too. A lot of people talked about how subvention is a gesture, and another one of the venue managers that I spoke to said that it's not so much about the amount of money that you're offering, but it's really about showing that you want the business and that you really understand the pressures that conference organisers are under. And for a number of conference organisers, they confirmed that subvention can really make or break the event. The key stress factor for professional conference organisers is their budget or their lack of budget. So it's a really significant factor. So obviously the research that I did was all pre-COVID, and now that we are starting to perhaps look forward and be a bit more optimistic about what the future is going to hold, what I've really learnt from my research and from talking to venue managers and professional conference organisers is that visa support is an area that is distinctly important to conference organisers and might just influence the ultimate decision when choosing a site for an association conference. And also had a lot of confirmation that subvention, like it or loathe it, subvention is a big factor too. And once again, it can have a real influence over site selection. So I'm going to wrap things up here. If there are any questions for me and there's time, then I'd be happy to answer those. And if not, I'd be very happy to hand back to Miguel and to the panel. But I think there may be one quick question.
There is indeed, Emma. Thank you so much for that fascinating discussion. We had one question from Caroline Jackson, which I'll actually put on the screen. The UK is coming back later from the pandemic than other countries. Will we need subventions to entice conferences back, or should we focus on creating new ones? I wonder if you had
a really good
comment
question
on that.
From my point of view, and based on the research that I've done, I would say subvention is a huge part of a destination and a venue strategy and makes a huge difference. And what we have seen, as I said, is second-tier destinations gaining market share. And I think that's going to speed up post-COVID too. Most, not all, but most of these destinations not only offer subvention, but they're very overt in how much they offer and how available it is. So I would suggest, from my point of view, yes, it's something that we should really consider to be competitive going forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much for responding to that, Ray, and thank you very much for your intervention. And I think thank you everybody who's commented, who's put in the chat where they're watching from. It's great to see people from all over the world joining us live. And if you're watching this after in the recording, then you missed out. But here we are. We are live right now. So I'm going to hand the virtual stage over to James, and we're talking about Smart Venues 2.0. Really exciting topic. I'll bring James. Emma, thank you again for your magnificent intervention. And over to you, James, to lead this exciting panel.
Yeah, we're very lucky today to have with us James Rees from Excel London and president of ICA, as well as Wee Minong, who runs the amazing convention centre at Marina Bay Sands Resort in Singapore. And I've asked Adam Parry to join us because he books exhibition and conference venues. Unfortunately, Sven wasn't able to join us today. But I think we'll start because we've kind of shared the discussion framework. So I think before we kind of launch into the 2.0 part of venues, I'm going to do this alphabetically, and I'll go to the venue booker first, Adam Parry, and I'd say, so Adam, what does a smart venue mean to you as an event booker?
It's an interesting one. I think my best example is actually of a venue that I've worked with for many years, which is 1 Wimpole Street. And they've continually invested in not only bringing new technologies into their venue, but testing that they work within the environment, the types of events that they help event organisers put on there. And that ranges everything from live streaming technologies, high definition cameras to get a really good quality picture online, good internet backbone, obviously with the rise of technology used not only at events but by event organisers. That's been really important, and also putting that technology in the hands of the delegates and attendees as well. So for me, that's what a smart venue looks like. As a venue, they understand the importance of technology, they understand the appetite for technology, but they put the infrastructure and the team around that in order to support an organiser in utilising that technology as part of their event.
Okay, so you're seeing like the tech as like the main smart bit of a venue. And James, how do you feel about that? I mean, what's your take on the smart venue idea?
Well, obviously I'm representing a venue far bigger than Wimpole Street, who are clearly doing it very well in Adam's experience. Part of the smart venue debate is around, traditionally it's been around the simplification, if you like, of just saying, what's the technology element, what's the backbone, the bandwidth, etc. One thing at Excel London, very similar to other large venues around the UK and around the world that I speak to with my ICA hat on, but we've noted the demand, if you like, of the attendees in our venues. On average, one person brings 2.5 devices that they need to link up to our technology into the venue when they visit. So that's and if you're dealing with 30, 40, 50,000 people in the venue at any one time, that's a big bandwidth. And you then have to deal with clustering, because if you have a big plenary, then there's a clustering issue potentially, where all of those people with 2.5 devices are all in one place, demanding high speed, etc. So overall, we've traditionally thought about smart venues in a very techie way, but I think what we need to do is think about how life is developing and how, when we buy food and beverage, we want and it's something we may get into, contactless life, which has been coming to us steadily, but I think COVID has now accelerated that. So that's I think where a big area that we need to think about, and where venues are going to have to go.
Great, thanks, James. And Weeman, from your side of the world, what's your view on the smart venue? How did you configure your smart venue?
Well, 5 to 6 years ago, if you talk about a smart venue, people will say, okay, that's Wi-Fi, but I think that's the baseline. If you can get free Wi-Fi in McDonald's, you go to a world-class convention venue, you need to get Wi-Fi. If you don't get free Wi-Fi, it's criminal. Now, I totally agree with what James has said. It's not just about the bandwidth, but bandwidth is the very baseline, because that's how we all live our lives now. 2.5 devices per delegate. If you multiply that by 10,000 delegates, that's a lot of devices. Now, a smart venue 2.0, in my view, doesn't only need to have great Wi-Fi, which is the baseline. It needs to have two things. It needs to have number one, the ability to drive data, collect data from the delegates, be it from your preferences, and drive this data across to the building for the building to make smart decisions. Taking an example of what James has said, clustering of people into one particular zone. So how do you mitigate it? Do you have enough technology to drive additional bandwidth to that particular zone? A simple way would be to look at the overall internet heat map within a venue to see if there's a clustering of internet connections within the zone, and driving using wireless APs to drive connection into a zone to augment that particular digital experience. But more importantly, I think smart venues of the future must be able to do a few things. It must be able to give the delegates a chance of experiencing new things, new experiences. It must be the platform to drive and augment engagement, and not just a platform for us to transact business knowledge or networks, but a platform for us as a venue, as a delegate, and as an entire ecosystem to drive engagement to the audiences and the communities that we serve.
That's some really good points there, Adam. So how do you feel as an organizer about a smart venue 2.0, about providing these new experiences? I mean, what, you know, your delegates coming there, how important is that partnership with the venue and the experience that you've designed?
I think the key word there is partnership, James, and that's the way that we've always seen our relationship with the Truman Brewery and other venues like One Wimpole that we've used. You know, it's a very attractive proposition for the venues to be working with us and other organisers in that way, because it allows us to create a better experience for our attendee, ultimately gain more insight, make better decisions about the event in subsequent years. So it's what I would expect, but it's also great to see the vision of venues working in that way, because it ultimately will help me make my business or my events a better overall experience for my attendee.
Excellent. And James, just come back to, I'd like you to interrogate Weeman's point about the data collection. And I think that's really, really important to all organisers as well as the venues. I mean, what's your opinion on that comment?
I think Weeman is, and we know Weeman's has a great venue and they're very forward-looking. It is clear to me that venues need to embrace more technology, and a good example would be, you know, we all walk around our lives with our phones, and we have apps for whatever suits our lifestyles. It seems, and one of the big things during COVID, we're all missing the opportunity, the camaraderie, and the building of trust that we have at face-to-face meetings. But I think for venues to play their part in those face-to-face meetings being even better in the future is something we really need to think about. And one of the things that meetings do is they, as we in the industry know, they provide opportunities for some accidental meetings, for, you know, collisions, as we're going, you know, as we're networking or as we're going from session to session. And it is strange to me that we still are in a scenario where I arrive at the venue, I've pre-registered, I go to a desk and I get a badge and I put a lanyard on and I wander around with a badge around my neck. The smart venues of the future, I think, will allow for us to pre-arrange a lot of what we need to provide data-wise. And if this phone, as I walk through the entry to the venue, registers me, places me at that part of the venue, and also, you know, maps me as I go through the venue, it will allow people to see me. So those people who want to see James Rees when he comes to whatever the event, they can see me and they can more easily find me. And I can do exactly the same with those people that are going to be important for my business connections and my network. So I think we need to take this opportunity, and I think COVID has allowed us to pause and to think about our businesses. We need to use that time to think, right, what is the next, if you like, evolution in the way that we deal with data, and map it out and find better ways of communicating with each other.
Excellent. So I'm going back to Weeman on the data piece again. So, you know, what James is saying here is that, you know, it's important to understand the attendee experience and networking. So if you were going to create a simple dashboard for venue data, what would be the main elements in there that you think should be included?
I think most important is the customer journey. All events and all customers and all delegates go through a particular customer journey. The physical delegate going through a venue goes through a physical journey, customer journey from the registration to the coffee break area, to the meeting zone, to the plenary, etc. The ability of technology. So in the past, we could only guess about all of this. So we could probably look at the amount of touch points or incidences where a particular delegate has gone through a particular zone. So it all sounds very draconian and, very big government, big brother looking down at you, but it's actually not that different from how you live our lives with Netflix. Have you ever watched Netflix? And if I chose action flick, the next 5 films that they recommend me are all action flicks. So using the same theory, it's not that intrusive as we think. The ability of course, the delegate to turn quiet and turn private, just like your typical Facebook connection. I don't want people to contact me. I turn my account private completely, and that should be made available. It also should be the amount of maybe interest groups within a particular community they are in. So if you are, for example, serving the Association of Dentists and FDI, for example, and dentists, what are the 5 main points that they are more interested in? They might be whiskeys, they might be movies, etc. Creating little communities and seeing how how the respective audiences, click on various experiences as they move through the particular venue. So it's a ever evolving. I wouldn't say a balanced scorecard. It's probably ever evolving canvas that is specific and different to every single event and every single community that we serve. But the philosophy behind is similar, capturing the most amount of touch points in a particular zone or particular interest, and then driving engagement through that particular area.
Excellent. So James, when we had our sort of event discussion, Sven came up with this idea of smart value chains in terms of the just like Weeman's been describing here, the touch points within the venue. And Sven was talking about the touch points as the person touches down at the airport or at the train station and has that experience of the event from that point. Do you think that's a valid point, that the venue needs to get involved with the organizer in partnership with the rest of the city for large conventions in terms of the smart value chain? Or do you think that's something that's just left to the organizer?
I think it's interesting, actually, because I was listening to Emma's comments at the start of this session. And venues, if venues are going to win bids, they need to absolutely know what the overall experience is going to be from the start to the finish of all the delegates that will be coming through their doors as part of the event. We know that the overall delegate experience, in my view, starts the moment the delegate locks the front door and leaves their house to come to our venues, our cities, our hotels, our destinations. The experience, and if you're wanting to win bids and win association events or corporate events, you need to be embedded into the full journey that those delegates and the organizers are going to be making. One of the reasons why post-COVID there is a hesitancy for big organizations to restart events is because they lack the ability to have 100% control of that whole delegate journey. And whilst they can control the hotel environments, the venue environments, and I think venues are up there with the best in having the processes and protocols to manage clean, hygienic, safe environments. Have a delegate that arrives at an airport and jumps into any old taxi, as an example, something that's not pre-planned or can't be pre-planned and pre-booked, there is an exposure there to risk. And as we go forward post-COVID, all organisers are going to be into the risk management business, if you like. So I do agree with the point that that Sven makes, and venues have to understand, if they're going to win business and be part of that whole chain of an event experience, they have to know what else is going on around them. Otherwise, they have a limit to how they can influence the decision of an organizer to book their venue. Yep.
And Adam, can I come to you on that now? I mean, what do you think about the smart value chain idea? The one that Emma talked about and Sven talked about. Is that an important aspect for you as an organizer?
Yeah, my own personal opinion on attracting attendees back to events now that we've lived through this pandemic a massive part of that will be showcasing the venue and the surrounding areas as that destination that you want to come to and spend your evenings and maybe a day either side of as well. So having access to that information, that value and that data will allow us to market our event better and do a better job of personalizing that marketing to those attendees in order to convince them to not only spend time out of the office and away from home, but all the great things that they can do around and as part of that event. I think that's going to be really important going forward, that as event owners working with the venues, we need to be showcasing the destinations which we are laying out to people to come and engage with.
Good. So I'm going to move on now to the elephant in the room, the COVID, which we've kind of mentioned a few times. I'm going to go to Weeman first because we've seen incredibly low mortality rates in Singapore. We also know that in Asia, you have a lot more experience in dealing with these kinds of infections because of SARS and things like that. So how do you think COVID-19 has impacted the smart venue idea, Weeman? And yeah.
So well, taking into example, I think you raised a good example. We did have the 2003 experience of SARS. And how we could contain that by effective border control, effective contact tracing. Now, COVID-19 has come and changed almost everything that we know. Number one, it brought the industry that we all love to a complete standstill. And as you pointed out earlier on, or as Sven pointed out earlier on, it's about the touch points. It's about that risk management. It's about the risk mitigation and how we could live our lives in as normal a way as possible by putting all these mitigation points in play. So suddenly things that we have imagined in the past before, we have touched on a little bit, like technology has suddenly come to the forefront. Technology has always been an afterthought in our industry. We deal with the physical journeys and then, with a little time and little budget we've got, let's do the technology part. But the last few months, technology has come to the forefront. It has shown us how we could make audiences and communities meet see eye to eye, even though they can't meet face to face. We explored, in Singapore, for example, we re-explored the idea of holograms. Holograms is not new. It's maybe about 10, 15 years old. But in the past, if a speaker can't make it, we simply forgot about him and got another speaker instead, and we invite him hopefully the next year. But now, no one could meet almost, and we explored using holograms to bring content to people in order for people to meet and for people to drive engagement and drive content. Contactless I think is a almost given thing for the industry now. It is contactless registration, for example, how you could do the badging experience that James Rees has explored and mentioned just now. How could you do that with using the mobile phone, which is very important. And I think the overall thing about COVID, it is the great catalyst that the industry was waiting for with regards to technology. It made us fast forward everything by many months, many years. We, as an example, we were thinking about building a high-tech studio December or January of this year before COVID hit us. To be very frank, it should have been a 3-year thing, but COVID came and fast forwarded it became a 3-month thing, and it became reality within 3 months. Not because for a very simple reason, because the need to have that technology to help our audiences, to help our communities reach each other and drive content has just magnified and jumped to the forefront.
So, James, do you think that low-touch environments, as Weeman's mentioned now, are really kind of part of that new 2.0 idea?
100%. And we as venues, we now it's an opportunity really for us to invest in touchless technologies, etc. At Excel London, we will not be dealing with cash going forward at our retail outlets. For those that know the venue, we have a central walkway. We refer to it as our boulevard, and we have coffee shops, restaurants, sandwich bars in those areas, and those will all be cash free going forward. Our car parking where we do make a charge will be cash free, and it is the way forward. More and more of our lives. And I think what venues do, and I agree with Wee Min, the fast forward button has been placed on many things by COVID. What venues do, sometimes slower and sometimes quicker than we should do, is to reflect life. And we now if we go to a shopping mall, we expect to eat good food and have a great coffee. In the old days in venues, the food and beverage service was pretty, let's face it, pretty poor. But now you can get great coffee, you can get great sandwiches, you can get great variety, and all of those life changes it's almost a magnifying glass on the venue. The venue has to replicate in order to be providing good delegate and exhibition attendee experiences, which will then thereby enhance their business outcomes. We've got to provide absolutely the right environments, and those environments where it's a pleasure to go to such an event, whether it's an exhibition, a congress, or whatever. It's got to become a pleasurable experience, and that's where where technology, where technology is our life now. In many respects, we're driven by data and the ability to get to things, but we also like to enjoy our food and beverage and those other experiences that life brings us, and that's where venues need to step up and fast forward plans that may have been in the making but need to happen now.
Good. So Adam, from the technical side, so James said technology is everything. Have you seen a lot of innovation happening in the technology space over the last 6 months in terms of smart venues or technology, that low touch technologies, or even basically virtual venues where people are visiting gamescapes rather than the physical venue itself?
I think what I've seen more than anything is an abundance of our current event technology providers, not only the platform providers that we're seeing now helping us to deliver virtual events, but also those physical on-site technology providers who have really looked at their platforms or the technology they provide and asked themselves that question of how can I adapt this, innovate on top of it, and help that to get back to a safe place. So I'll come on to it a little bit in my presentation, but there's many suppliers who may have had a physical product, which would be a high contact product, and looked at the ways that they can digitize that and allow the attendee to still get the same experience, but without the element of risk or fear around contact and cleanliness and safety. And others that have also then taken the technology that they've got and enabled it to be used in a much more contactless way going forward. So there's definitely those on the hardware side. And I think we'll see a lot more innovation over the coming years as we get more back to a stable position, and when we know what events might look like when it comes to, let's say, hybrid events and physical events going forward. Once we have that certainty, I think we'll see much more innovation come through in abundance.
Good. So we're going to wrap this up soon, and I just want to get some ideas on sustainability and the smart venue in terms of building design and how a venue becomes sustainable or offers us a kind of sustainability philosophy for the attendees as well as the venue itself. Wee Min, have you done any work in the sustainability area?
Yes, the Marina Bay Sands, which I'm from, we have almost every single imaginable sustainability accreditation, because we firmly believe that sustainability is a thing to stay. Now, let me put it in the context with COVID. We are now confronting, reimagining our business models in response to COVID. But to be frank, COVID is transient. If you put it into perspective of sustainability, COVID could be mitigated by developments in science and technology. 6 months ago, we were all hopeless. 6 months later, now we have got two collected as a world. We have got two vaccines, more to come, and new testing methods. And I'm sure 6 months later, there will be science and technology will mitigate that even further. But sustainability is something that couldn't be mitigated in a matter of months or weeks or even years. So it has to be one of collective action. So we in a normal non-COVID world, we do 3,600 events a year. We looked at, when we first looked at sustainability, we asked ourselves, where will we all be, in 20 years time, maybe in sea levels that are maybe 10 meters higher. And there lies the opportunity for all of us to literally look at smart building design, how we can use smart building design to drive, again, data in terms of temperature, in terms of chill water, in terms of, amount of solar power, for example, to traditional building systems. How can we drive things like activity levels, like people moving within spaces, into the building management system in order to save electricity, save water, and once you optimize that, how could we then move into full carbon neutral? So our own sustainability journey took maybe about 8 years or so. It started when I first joined the company, not by me, but by the great sustainability team that we have got. It took us 8 years to be completely, for the convention center to be completely carbon neutral, and for us to have a viable sustainability program to engage our clients, our organizers, exhibition organizers, and our conference organizers with. So while we are all very fixated and all very concerned with the challenges that COVID presents us, I feel very strongly that it's transient when you compare that to something as far-reaching and as far-reaching as sustainability.
Excellent. And James, what's your view on the kind of building design aspect and as a smart venue?
Well, we at XL London, we're actually currently going through an evaluation of a plan to potentially, we're already big, but we are thinking about a further extension. We are looking ahead to the future, and part of the design criteria with our architects is that we want to build sustainability into that new facility, even further than we already have. And actually that the new part of the venue, which would then mean some retrofitting for the existing venue, helps us to become a carbon net zero building. We think that's absolutely going to be part of our future. We think that will be not only good for business, but clearly good for the environment. And it actually is something where, if you think about, I think venues in some respects have to take them out of that blinkered business view of we're a venue that hosts events. Venues are assets for cities and destinations and should be seen as such, not in isolation, if you like, because going back to the bidding idea as well, if a city wants to become synonymous with an industry or a certain professional, whether it's a medical professional or such, it needs to be part of the integrated network of its city. And so we're working very closely with the Mayor of London to advise them of our planning, and that goes to his agenda of the health of Londoners. That's one of his top aims, is for healthy Londoners, for improved respiratory and heart health over the course of his mayoralship, and a sustainable venue in every respect is going to be part of that, and it's something that we're thinking about very carefully now.
Excellent. And Adam, from the organizer point of view, so is sustainability important in terms of the experience you offering your delegates at the venues?
Absolutely. I think it's on everybody's radar. It has been for a while, and ever so much more it's increasing. So for me as a venue booker or somebody that hosts events in venues, the more sustainable that venue is, the more they help us as an organizer to be sustainable. So they're a sustainable choice by choosing them to host my event with. And that's a very attractive thing. That's something that I can get involved in with my event marketing. That's something us as an organization can absolutely get behind and part of our CSR and stuff. So for me, the more sustainable a venue is, the more attractive it is to host my events there.
Great. So I'm going to bring Emma back into this conversation because we've got some questions for the panel as well as for Emma. So we'll cover Emma's question off first. I'm just looking for it here. It's from Sue Gold. Do you think that subventions will be appropriate across all types of business meetings, not just large pharma?
That's a really good question, and I think there are two different ways of looking at this. First of all, if you think about how much money is offered as part of a subvention package, compare that to the economic income to the destination through hosting that event, then it's very easy to justify subvention because the ROI is significant. But if you look at it from another point of view, most of the venues and the convention bureaus that I've spoken to have all talked about having a limited subvention fund. So they have to think carefully and strategically about how they use it and who it's offered to. And it's one thing to offer it to organisers of not-for-profit events where it really can make a difference between that event going ahead or not. Compare that to offering it to meeting planners with a more generous budget who work for profit-making organisations, then I think it changes. And I'd be a little bit more uncomfortable with offering subvention to those organisations, particularly from a limited fund. Having said that, there are certain destinations that do. So it's something that we will have to see post-COVID. Great,
thank you. The next question I have, I'm going to direct to Weemin. It's from one of my students, Liv Watton, and says, what changes have been made during this time do you think to be continued or combined into hybrid events in the future? So are smart venues going to be hybrid event venues?
I think that's definite. What is really, we believe very strongly in the return of the face-to-face industry. So we do 3,600 events in the past, face-to-face, we expect to do that number or more moving forward. However, hybrid is here to stay. We also believe that if we run 3,600 events a year moving forward, we will also be running 3,600 virtual events as part of a hybrid element. So every single successful face-to-face event will now be paired with an equally successful, equally well thought of, well-designed virtual event. And one of the key things that we all learned was that the virtual event is not an extension of the physical event. It is equivalent to having two trains in a platform, setting off together with the same, setting off together means to start the event together, landing at the next platform together, exchanging passengers, which are delegate engagement, going off, not meeting, but going off towards the same direction and ending in the same point together. So I think that's the key learning point that all of us would learn moving forward, how to run better hybrid events, not just as an extension of a physical event, but as equally well thought of and equally well planned events in itself.
I think I agree with you that the virtual audience isn't a second-class kind of audience as to the live. James, next question to you. This might be more of an ICA question because you've got to deal with both sides of the coins in that role and your normal role. Is from Caro Uloa. How do you see venues becoming more flexible with cancellation policies after COVID-19?
What a great question, and that's one of the most regular questions I get asked, either at meetings or via email. I think inevitably it's one of those scenarios where we all need to have the one thing I think that has come out of this, and I speak directly through my experience at Excel and also because I know other venue managers are having the same conversations by being really much more open. I'm not saying that, you know, in the past we were all cloak and dagger and keeping secrets, but I think it has allowed us to be very open about what we want as a, to use a cheesy business phrase, getting a win-win situation out of these negotiations. And I'm talking about events that have been directly affected by COVID that we are having to renegotiate and postpone. So by being brutally open and explaining our position and then understanding our organisers' positions better, we've managed to, if you like, you know, climb through those thorny bushes of getting renegotiations and moving events to 2021 or beyond. We've had events from 2020 rebook into 24, and there's one that's going to go to 26 because of rotation policies. Inevitably, there is the new force majeure clause in particular, or liability element, that needs to be negotiated for that future contract. And my only advice is that is to be open and to look at how neither side gets punished. My experience is that COVID has not been, it's not the venue's fault and it's not the organizer's fault. So therefore we have to have discussions that allow both sides the flexibility so that venues are not punished, but nor is an organizer punished through any onerous retention of deposits, etc. So, but we have found good mutually acceptable clauses for future, you know, a future COVID type situation with our clients, and I know other venues across Europe and across the globe have done exactly the same.
Excellent, good answer, James. So look, the chat's just really on fire, but you know, we're limited to 1 hour today, and I'm really sorry about that because questions are still coming in. But you know, there's some, if anybody's got any answers to some of the questions coming in, please feel free to answer them on the YouTube chat. But we literally have to switch to the last 10 minutes of the event to Adam Parry's Tech Trends presentation. So Weeman and James and Emma, thank you so much for joining us today. That's fantastic, and taking the time to be with us. Thank you. So Miguel, shall we hand it over to Adam?
Sounds like a good idea to me. Adam, are you ready to take the virtual stage? All right, there we go.
Absolutely, mate. So, hello everyone. Just a little bit background on me. Day to day, I'm the editor of eventindustrynews.com. We're a global publication covering all aspects of organising events, from exhibitions, concerts, corporate events, association events, etc. And obviously, over the last 8 or 9 months, very much the COVID pandemic that's been affecting us all. 10 years ago, I wanted to incorporate my passion, which is technology, into writing and see what technology could do to change the way we organise events. I found amazing companies out there, and that led us to launch the Event Technology Awards, which not only supports the technology companies and showcases what they're doing, but also the organisers and yourselves in the way that you're utilising technology, because that's actually where the true innovation comes from. The aim of today's presentation is just to give you a little insight into where my head's going, and some of it is far out there. Some of it I think we'll absolutely see in the coming year or so. And there should be a little and in there, because some of this is and event tech trends. So it's event and event tech trends, but technology will be the driving force to allowing us to see those trends come into play. So first of all, software as a service. At the moment, the vast majority of technology for the events industry is based around the traditional software as a service model. Now, this works really well for companies or individuals who are tech savvy, experienced in setting up platforms, or have a dedicated team to be able to onboard people and set those technologies up. However, I don't feel that really represents or really reflects the expectation or experience of the events industry at large, which has a business model mainly based around working with contractors and suppliers who bring in their expertise needed to make the best use of that technology. As an example of this, let's say an AV supplier. An organizer could buy or hire all the AV technology they need for an event and set that up themselves. However, that probably wouldn't be the most advantageous way of doing it. They bring the technology company, the AV company in, and their team really make that technology have the wow factor. I'm already seeing, suppliers and other consultancy companies pop up to help offer that service. So I think we'll see more of that come through from the supplier, but I also think we'll see more consultancies and more businesses set up to help organizers deliver the different various range of technology platforms that they see. So this is a bit of a saying of mine. I think for our industry, it should be software and a service rather than software as a service. Second to that, events are really a mechanism of bringing like-minded people together around a topic, niche, or industry. However, event organizers can tend to go dark or quiet on their audience most of the year, only re-engaging once it's close to the next registration cycle. Now, if we look outside of the events industry, communities are really big business. From memberships to subscription models to direct sales and marketing options for companies wanting to target those community members. In the coming years, I see a trend of what we would class as pure play event organizers really looking to community platforms and technologies to serve their attendees all year round and opening up new revenue streams at the time. A key benefit to this is keeping those members and attendees connected all year round, something as an industry we've talked about for a long, long time. Now, event technology suppliers, I think they will increasingly offer community-focused solutions to help streamline the operations and communications for that organizer. Now, going really into the future, this could mean the one-click registration utopia, and James mentioned this a little bit as well in the venue play, which we have all as organisers in the industry strive for. That'll help us to make the process much, much simpler for the actual attendee, because we'll have a really good rounded buyer profile straight out of the bat, rather than relying on really lengthy and long registration forms that can frustrate attendees sometimes. As an industry, on paper, we've already demonstrated that we can organise and host COVID-safe events in line with the requirements of organisations such as the DCMS. However, ensuring attendees feel safe coming back to physical events and also ensuring the confidence of the companies employing these attendees will be one of the biggest challenges facing our sector over the coming months. I believe technology can play a supporting role in both the on-site experience, but also in the communication and marketing of the event as a safe event. Now, there are some key areas which I feel we'll see a rise of, and we've already mentioned some of this in the last panel discussion. So contactless technology is absolutely one of those, whether that's payments or touch points technology to collect information from exhibitors, sponsor walls, and other delegates. That'll become really important over the coming years. Attendee location and zoning monitoring, again, we mentioned that. This will help ensure also that conference rooms, locations at the events don't become overcrowded or overpopulated and stay safe. Facial identification is one that I think we'll see rise up. Now, it's really important that this is not facial recognition. This is not identifying a person and who they are, but more so identifying their face and what they have on that being a mask. So this technology already exists, and the way that it would work is that somebody walking towards a screen, if a camera detects that person isn't wearing a mask, it would show them a really polite message to encourage them to wear that. And we all know that reminding people is a really important role in making things safe. Telepresence, we mentioned holograms. This is kind of on that stream. We've seen it in the past, although it's not something new. We've seen it pop up many years ago. I think we could actually see a resurgence of this in giving people a way to connect with attendees physically, remotely at an event, and actually walk the show floor or walk the event. So I might be wrong on that, but it would be interesting to see if that rises up. And then again, temperature checking technologies, I think they'll just become commonplace at events over the coming years and at venues as well. The explosion of online events has opened up access to anyone, anywhere in the world, actually making them more accessible by nature to those who may have not been able to travel to the event. However, putting a video content and live stream online simply won't do in the long term. When developing online content for events, teaching, learning, etc., it's essential that that content be presented in such a way to make it accessible as possible to persons with disability or learning differences. In some cases, people with identified learning differences will have access to assistive technologies at their end for engaging with online content. They may also be versed in how to set up their web browser in order to accommodate their needs. But nevertheless, as organisers, there are some steps that we should be considering when presenting content online, whether that be educational content, video streams, closed captions, that kind of thing, to ensure that our content is accessible to everybody, no matter what. And I think therefore see a trend coming out where not only the technology platform providers will obviously develop their platforms to allow us to engage those people better online, but probably a slew of third-party solutions and plugins that we'll be able to bolt onto our event solutions in order to make them accessible and inclusive. And then hub and spoke, online events, hybrid events, virtual events, these are all terms that we've heard time and time again over the last 8 months. And I think the truth is no one really knows what hybrid or digitized events will really look like. However, one thing that I think will happen, and one trend, is the hub and spoke model. Now, hub and spoke to me personally means that these are smaller physical or micro events taking place in various locations around the world, connected by a central platform to enable attendee network, sharing of content, engaging of content, etc. Now, hub and spoke would still provide the value of face-to-face without necessarily the cost of international travel for the attendee and time away from home. And for industries that are actually global, but very much work on a local or regional scale, I think this will really help people to maintain relationships while accessing global knowledge base and a hive mind. One of the main advantages for everybody of this type of model is speed. Microtransactions is another trend that I think we will see rise in the events industry. Now, these microtransactions are often abbreviated as MTX, and as a business model, they're where users or attendees can buy virtual goods or access with small transactions. Now, they're often used in free-to-play games provided as a revenue source for that developer, and we've seen them as a staple in mobile apps for many a year now. Now, I believe microtransactions offer the opportunity for new revenue models for event organizers, especially around access to content. Microtransactions, for example, could be used to pay to upgrade a ticket during the event, access specific premium content, allowing the main event to stay free and open to everybody to register, and even possibly a way for speakers and content creators to increase their income around events through tips like we see in streaming communities on platforms like Twitch. Microtransactions have been so successful in the gaming world, developers and content creators now purposely build and create their experiences with this type of business model in mind. And I think we could see that trickle down into the events industry. 10 minutes is not long, so sorry if I blasted through that. I think I just about got into 10 minutes, but happy to answer any questions if we've got time.
I haven't seen any questions come up, but no questions for Adam, but let's see. If any...
Your microtransactions trend, I think that's going to be big.
I think for me, one of the things that's been a big topic in the industry is speaker fees, right? Some people see a value in speaking at an event for free. Others want to be paid, and that's a balancing act as well between knowing that that person's of value and is going to resonate well with the audience. And let's face it, when you see a good, let's say a street busker, you want to give them a little tip for doing a good job. And I think that's a bit that's missing now between the speakers and the attendees. Like, as an attendee, if I really value, let's say, Miguel's session or your session, James, maybe I feel inclined to purposefully and meaningfully give you a donation because I want to see more of that content. And I think that's a really good way. If we can, as an organizer, bridge that gap and allow that kind of revenue model to go through, I think that'll help close this gap as well around speaker fees and people being paid to speak at events.
Excellent point. Do you agree with
that? Yeah. We actually had a question come up about that from Franco de la Croix-Vaubois. How could we bring that into events? I don't know if you have any specific ideas on how that would work, Adam. Anything you could share?
It's a really interesting one. Obviously, people are very cautious around banking access and that kind of stuff. So the way that it works in the gaming world is essentially you buy the in-game currency. Now, I think an in-game currency is, as such, might work for an event that might come bundled as part of your, like, say, ticket. And with your ticket, you get 100 ETL tokens or something like that. Or you can maybe buy an access, or even through gamification through the rest of the year, you can earn that and then donate that as a part of your your pot to whatever speaker you want, and then the organizer takes care of the financials at the back end. That's also, I think, a great way that sponsors and maybe exhibitors, etc., could also give that to attendees as maybe a benefit or a VIP ticket, etc. So I'm not 100% sure because it's obviously not come into the events industry right now, but if it works in the gaming world, it probably could transition quite easily over into the events world.
Excellent.
Great. Do we have time for one more question, James? I think that's an interesting one come up. From Thomas Blom, we've seen concerts move to gaming platforms. Do you think events eventually will move to a full digital event gaming platform?
I think that just as physical events choose a venue based on the requirements and the type of event that they are producing, then we'll also choose platforms in the same way when it comes to virtual or hybrid events. You know, exhibitions have a very much different objective to, let's say, conferences, and live entertainment, which was mentioned there, again, very different objective and would experience a different experience. So I think it's really hard to say one way or the other. I'm a particular fan of Melody VR, which is what Live Nation are using at the moment to bring still that live entertainment into the home of us as consumers, while also giving a different experience because you can actually move around the event, maybe even closer to the band or artist, etc. So it's really hard to say. I think we'll definitely see gaming technology or those type of platforms used quite a lot through the industry, but it'll all depend on what type of event is being produced and what the objective is.
Perfect. Quite a few questions coming in. We could stay here for a long time. It's up to you, gentlemen, if you could spare a few more minutes.
I'm happy to, James. It's your call, mate.
Yeah, let's take a few more questions. I have to teach my students at 2:15, so you might lose me, but you guys continue, please.
I'll answer quickly.
One final question, I think, from Naomi Rose about influencer marketing. I think it's a little bit beyond today's topic, but I think if you'd like to share a couple of thoughts on that, that'd be a nice way to maybe wrap up and call it a day.
Absolutely. So for me, influencer marketing is one to be really careful around. You know, for me, influencer marketing already brings up the idea of really, really famous people being paid to push a product or solution. And I think we, as a nation or society, we've become quite accustomed to that, and we kind of see through it. It's almost sometimes looks a little bit disingenuous, shall we say. However, I think the same way of utilizing influencers or micro-influencers can be used with an event really, really effectively. We do it on Event Tech Live. We use a solution called Lean In, and essentially we empower each individual attendee to become an influencer within their sphere. There is another great technology out there called Spellfy, which is allowing people to take photographs and share that from space with the rest of the event community. And that micro-influencer, that genuine experience of an individual attendee and utilizing that, I think is for us a more advantageous way to go. But that's not to say that influencer marketing can't work for the events industry, because I know some events that are utilizing it extremely well. And if we're honest, we've been using influencer marketing as an industry since the first time we put a speaker on an event. We utilize our speakers as a way to attract an audience and to also attract their audience of influence as well. So it's nothing new, but I think we can absolutely use it in various different ways.
Perfect. I think that wraps up nicely. Adam, thank you so much for your contribution. I think that was a wonderful way to connect to technology events and all the different themes of today's event. James, any last words from you, the facilitator, organizer, moderator of all the event?
Well, I just want to say thank you to Adam for stepping into the panel at the last minute, to all our other speakers, and to you, Miguel, alumna of Westminster University a while back and still engaged with us, which is fantastic. And thank you for being our MC and event producer today.
You're very welcome. And that concludes the Smart Venues 2.0 Site Selection and Tech Trends University of Westminster and Learning Bridges event for today. Greetings to all of you watching. And if you're watching on demand, don't forget to click on the link to submit the survey, the research that the University of Westminster is doing on COVID-19 and the effects on business. Really important if you have a few moments to spare to answer that. So goodbye from us. Till next time.
Bye-bye.